The cartel's favorite banker is Beijing. Why? All right, two groups you'd think have nothing in common: Mexican drug cartels and Chinese underground banking networks. One sells fentanyl, the other moves money nobody's supposed to see. Turns out they're business partners. Best business partners money can buy. Congress just held a hearing in early June asking exactly how deep this goes. The numbers they put on the table are staggering. Let's get into it. House Financial Services Committee, Oversight Subcommittee. Chairman Dan Muser opens with a real banger of a sentence.
Today, Chinese money laundering networks are the dominant money laundering partner for drug cartels.
Not one option among many. The default choice. Why dominant? Muser laid out the pitch like he was reading off their sales brochure. Near instant transfers, fees so low they undercut every competitor, and they assume the risk. Meaning, if law enforcement seizes the cash mid-transfer, they still pay the cartel. A money-back guarantee for drug money. Somewhere there's a guy with a spreadsheet tracking seizure compensation as a line-item business expense. Here's the number that should stop you mid-scroll. According to Treasury's Financial Crimes Unit, $312 billion in suspicious transactions tied to these networks moved through the U.S. financial system between 2020 and 2024, through 489 banks, over 200 money service businesses. And remember, that's only what got flagged. Congressman Zach Nunn called these networks the cartel's personal bankers, said they've built over 40,000 shell companies right here on U.S. soil. 40,000. That's not a network, that's a franchise. Nunn also brought it home, literally. Said, back in Iowa, fentanyl is now killing more young people his daughter's age than people his own age. Let that sit for a second. And these same networks, they don't just bank the cartels. Nunn says they launder for North Korean hackers, Iranian-linked operators, Russian crime syndicates. It's not a cartel bank, it's the rogue state bank. Forget what you think money laundering looks like. Forget duffel bags. Forget offshore accounts in a heist movie. This is white collar. This is multilingual. This has a finance director. Just weeks before the hearing, an indictment was unsealed in the Eastern District of Virginia. Two Chinese nationals, Ru Huanzhen and Hong Che-Wu, charged with laundering for the Sinaloa cartel and CJNG. The conspiracy allegedly ran for close to 9 years. Cocaine money, fentanyl money. Co-conspirators spread across the U.S., Mexico, Latin America, and China. A federal grand jury actually indicted them more than a year before the public ever heard about it. The case sat sealed, then it dropped. Both men are still out there. If convicted, 20 years each. Separately, a different case. A man named Puquan Huang pleads guilty. His job? Drive around the Carolinas and Georgia, picking up cartel cash in person. $80,000 to $200,000 a trip. The handoff method is almost charming in how low-tech it is. No fake IDs, no code names, just a pre-agreed serial number on a dollar bill. Meet at a gas station, confirm the number, hand over the bag, coordinated over WeChat. Then the cash gets cleaned, usually two ways. Buy electronics, ship them overseas, call it trade. Or convert it straight into crypto and move it across borders on the blockchain. One crew collects, one crew launders. Same supply chain, different department. Now let me walk you through the actual trick, because once you see it, you can't stop seeing it. A Treasury anti-laundering veteran who testified at the hearing explained it plainly. Cartels sell fentanyl in the U.S., collect dollars. Those dollars get converted into Mexican pesos and handed straight back to the cartel south of the border, almost instantly, almost like a mirror. That's one half of the trick. Here's the other half. China caps how much currency its own citizens can move out of the country. $50,000 a year. For a wealthy person trying to get money out, that's nothing. So the same brokers solve two problems at once. A Chinese national wanting dollars out of China hands over yuan. A cartel sitting on dirty dollars in the US hands those dollars to a broker who uses them to help that Chinese buyer purchase property, businesses, whatever they want right here in America. Not $1 crosses the Pacific. Not one yuan crosses it either. Value moves. Money stays put. One witness called it exactly what it is: money laundering with Chinese characteristics. Old systems flying money, trade misinvoicing, mirror swaps running on WeChat, and crypto instead of paper and gold. Which is exactly why regulators can't see it. They're watching the wires. The money never gets on one. So why does this keep happening through Chinese networks specifically? 1. Capital controls. That $50,000 cap creates a captive market of people desperate to move money. Where there's desperation, there's a broker. 2, they're just better at it. The old black market peso exchange used in Latin America for decades used to charge cartels around 15% commission. These Chinese networks, 1 to 2%, and the brokers eat the risk if the money gets seized. 3. One witness made an argument that day. His own estimate. Across nearly a dozen major categories of transnational crime, China leads almost every one. Added up, and something close to half of all global money laundering traces back to actors tied to the Chinese state. But here's what I don't need anyone's math for. A government that can delete a photo off the internet in under 5 minutes has no idea hundreds of billions are moving through a banking system it controls top to bottom? I don't buy it. Maybe it's not a command from the top, but a regime this good at surveillance doesn't get to plead ignorance about its own money. At some point, looking away is a choice. Here's the part that should actually make you uncomfortable, because so far this sounds like cartels and shady businessmen far away from you. It's not. There are roughly 300,000 to 500,000 Chinese students in the United States right now. And according to testimony at the hearing, a growing number are being recruited, sometimes knowingly, often not, as money mules. The recruiting pitch shows up on Chinese social media disguised as gig work, easy side income, currency exchange, help international students with cash transfers. Between 2020 and 2024, U.S. banks filed over 20,000 suspicious activity reports, nearly $14 billion, tied to people identifying as Chinese students. Some of it overlaps with something called Daigou, personal shoppers buying luxury goods in the U.S. to resell back in China. One Daigou ring alone pleaded guilty to laundering over $92 million this way. Buy electronics and designer bags with dirty cash, ship them to China, sell them legit. Most of these kids have no idea they just became a link in a transnational laundering chain, and when it falls apart, there's vanish into the network. The 20-year-old with the frozen bank account and the canceled visa, that's who eats the consequences. Because the hearing wasn't really about one indictment or one money mule scheme. It was about scale. One stat that came up, an estimated $1 trillion in capital flowed out of China in 2025 alone, the largest outflow on record. China's response wasn't to loosen the restrictions that drive people underground. It was to tighten them further, lock the front door tighter, and watch the side door get busier. The networks that grew out of that pressure aren't just laundering drug money anymore. Witnesses described a sprawling toolkit: fake invoices on trade shipments, black market currency brokers, ancient remittance systems repurposed for crypto, gift card fraud schemes, AI voice cloning scams targeting elderly Americans. One Treasury veteran put it simply, this isn't really about following the money anymore because the money doesn't move. It's value transfer without money movement. The cash stays exactly where it lands, only the ledger changes. And Treasury itself has started calling these groups networks instead of organizations, because there's no headquarters to raid, no single boss to arrest, just decentralized nodes that sync up whenever it's profitable. Here's the bottom line. Strict capital controls were supposed to keep money inside China. What they actually built is a sprawling global underground financial system, and cartels found their way into it because the price was right and nobody was watching the wires. $312 billion in flag transactions, 40,000 shell companies, $1 trillion leaving China in a single year, and a hearing room full of people trying to figure out where to even start. This is shaping up to be the next front after the chip war, after the supply chain war. Expect U.S. regulators to start leaning on the banks, the law firms, the accountants, and the real estate agents who keep this machine running, one sanction at a time. That's not a scandal, that's an economy. Hit subscribe. Send this to someone who still thinks this is just a drug problem. I'll see you next time.